The nurse had less than 3 seconds to decide whether to run. The military working dog charging toward her was already out of control. His handler was pulling the leash with everything he had. 3 doctors were backing away. A technician had dropped a tray and was scrambling toward the door, and the nurse standing directly in the dog's path could see the fear in his eyes beneath all that aggression. Then another military K9 stepped forward. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He didn't attack. He simply placed himself between the frightened dog and the nurse. And somehow, that quiet decision changed everything. If you're watching from somewhere in the world, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to see how far these stories travel. Because what happened between these 2 military K9s that morning was something the hospital staff would talk about for a very long time. At 8:12 that Wednesday morning, the veterinary wing of Harbor Point Naval Medical Center was unusually busy. The first appointment on the schedule was supposed to be routine. 2 military working dogs. 2 annual wellness checks. Nothing complicated. The younger dog was Hawke, a 6-year-old Belgian Malinois, assigned to explosive detection work. He was lean, muscular, and extremely athletic, with a dark sable coat, sharply pointed ears, and the intense concentration typical of a highly trained working dog. His handler, Chief Petty Officer Noah Briggs, had worked with him for almost 2 years. Hawke was disciplined. He could work around helicopters. He could move through crowds. He could ignore sirens, engines, and sudden movements. But that morning, Noah had noticed something he couldn't explain. Hawke wasn't acting like himself. The second dog was Sterling, an 8-year-old German shepherd with a broad chest, slightly graying muzzle and deep brown eyes. Sterling had spent most of his career in patrol and search operations. He was older now, slower, quieter. But nobody who knew him would ever call him weak. He had the calmness of a dog that had already seen almost everything. His handler, Senior Chief Marcus Ellery, walked beside him, with the leash hanging loosely in one hand. Sterling didn't pull, didn't pace, didn't scan nervously. He simply walked. At the entrance to the treatment wing, a nurse smiled when she saw him. "Good morning, old man." Sterling stopped. The nurse crouched. She was Tessa Morgan, a 33-year-old veterinary nurse who had spent nearly 5 years working with military working dogs. She scratched Sterling gently beneath his chin. His tail moved once. Marcus smiled. "He remembers people." Tessa laughed. "He certainly remembers me." Sterling leaned into her hand. "You're still my favorite." Marcus shook his head. "You tell him that every week." "Because it's true." Sterling looked entirely pleased with himself. Then Tessa noticed Hawke. The Malinois was standing several yards away. And he wasn't looking at her. He was looking above her, toward the ceiling. Tessa's smile faded. Noah noticed it too. "Hawke." The dog didn't respond. His nose lifted. He sniffed. Then he looked toward a stainless steel medical cart. Noah shortened the leash. "Easy." Hawke took one step. Noah stopped him. "Leave it." The dog looked at him. For a second, everything seemed normal. Then the cart moved. One wheel struck the floor. A sharp metallic clang echoed through the corridor. Hawke exploded. He lunged forward. Noah caught the leash before he could reach anything. "Whoa!" The sound startled everyone. A technician stepped backward. Dr. Adrian Vale, the veterinarian in charge, immediately raised his hand. "Everybody give him space." Noah braced himself. Hawke was breathing hard. His ears were forward. His eyes were wide. He kept looking toward the ceiling. Then toward the cart. Then around the room. Tessa understood something immediately. He wasn't simply angry. He was overwhelmed. But knowing that didn't make the situation less dangerous. Noah crouched beside him. "Look at me, Hawke." "Nothing." "Hawke." The dog's attention suddenly shifted toward Tessa. Tessa froze. Noah's voice became sharper. "Tessa, don't move." She stopped. Hawke stared at her. His body became rigid. Tessa slowly raised both hands where the dog could see them. "Easy." Hawke took a step. Noah pulled the leash tight. "Hawke." Another step. Tessa backed away. Her shoulder touched the examination counter. The dog's breathing grew louder. Then he barked. The sound echoed through the treatment room. Two technicians immediately ran for the doorway. A nurse pushed a rolling cart between herself and the dog. Dr. Vale shouted, "Clear the area." Tessa remained against the counter. She could hear her own heartbeat. Noah was fighting the leash now. "Hawke! Stay!" Hawke lunged. Noah caught him. The dog's front paws struck the floor hard. His teeth were visible. He wasn't biting anyone, but he looked terrifying. Tessa had seen frightened dogs before. She had never seen one this overwhelmed. Then something happened that made everyone stop. Sterling stood up. Marcus looked down. Sterling, the older German shepherd, didn't look at him. His eyes were fixed on Hawke. Marcus tightened his grip. "Stay." Sterling took one step forward. Marcus followed. "Easy." Sterling kept walking. Hawke noticed him. The barking stopped. The entire room went quiet. Sterling walked until he was several feet away from Hawke. Then he stopped. He didn't growl. He didn't bare his teeth. He didn't stare aggressively. He simply stood there, calm, still. Hawke stared back. Noah whispered, "What is he doing?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He watched his dog carefully. Then he said, "He's giving him something to focus on." Sterling slowly sat down. Hawke's breathing remained fast. His eyes moved between Sterling and Tessa. Sterling didn't react. He simply sat. Tessa couldn't understand it. The entire room was terrified of Hawke, but Sterling wasn't. He looked almost bored. Hawke took one cautious step toward him. Noah tightened the leash, but this time, Hawke didn't lunge. He sniffed. Sterling lowered his head slightly. Hawke took another step, then stopped. Sterling looked away. Hawke's ears shifted. His breathing slowed. Noah noticed. "His heart rate is dropping." Dr. Vale looked at Hawke. "Don't move." Nobody moved. Hawke stared at Sterling. The older dog remained completely relaxed. Then Hawke slowly sat down. Tessa's eyes widened. Only moments earlier, the dog had been fighting against his handler. Now he was sitting quietly several feet from Sterling. The room finally began breathing again. But Sterling wasn't finished. He stood, then walked toward Hawke. Marcus instinctively tightened the leash. "Careful." Sterling stopped. Hawke remained seated. The two dogs stood facing each other. Sterling lowered his head. Hawke sniffed. Then Sterling stepped sideways. And Tessa suddenly realized what he was doing. He was positioning himself between Hawke and her, not aggressively, not threateningly, just enough to create a barrier. Tessa swallowed. Her voice was barely audible. "He's protecting me." Marcus looked at her. "Yes." Then he looked at Hawke. "But that's not all he's doing." Tessa frowned. "What do you mean?" Marcus watched Sterling. "He's protecting Hawke too." Noah slowly loosened the leash. Hawke didn't react. Sterling remained between him and Tessa. Dr. Vale lowered his clipboard. "Nobody approach." Tessa nodded. Hawke looked toward the ceiling again. His ears lifted. Sterling immediately looked up too. Tessa followed their gaze. The ventilation system was running above them. She couldn't hear anything unusual. Neither could the doctors. But both dogs were listening. Tessa looked at Dr. Vale. "Do you hear that?" He shook his head. "No." Noah frowned. Hawke reacted before the cart moved. Marcus nodded. Sterling noticed it too. Everyone looked toward the ceiling. A faint vibration moved through the vent, almost impossible for humans to notice. Hawke's body tensed again. Sterling remained calm. Hawke looked at him, and just as quickly, his body relaxed. Tessa stared. She suddenly understood that Sterling wasn't merely preventing an attack. He was teaching Hawke how to respond to something frightening. And if that was true, then the most important question wasn't why Hawke had attacked the nurse. It was what had frightened him enough to make him believe he had to defend himself in the first place. Dr. Vale slowly reached for the phone. "We need maintenance in here." Noah looked at him. "Now." Vale nodded. "Now." Because whatever was happening inside that hospital wasn't over, and neither Tessa nor the doctors knew yet that the answer would reveal something remarkable about the older K9 standing silently between them. The maintenance technician arrived less than 2 minutes later. By then, Hawke had settled onto the floor. Sterling remained between him and Tessa. No body wanted to disturb the arrangement. Dr. Adrian Vale pointed toward the ceiling. "Check the ventilation unit serving this corridor." The technician looked confused. "The ventilation?" "Yes." Both dogs reacted to it. He glanced at the two K9s. Sterling was sitting calmly. Hawke was watching him. The technician pulled out a handheld diagnostic device. He walked toward the wall panel. Hawke's ears immediately lifted. Noah noticed. "Stop." The technician froze. Hawke stared at the equipment. Sterling looked at Hawke, then calmly turned his head toward the technician. Tessa understood. "He's watching everything," Noah nodded. "He doesn't know what the sound is." The technician slowly stepped back. The dog's breathing eased. Dr. Vale looked at him. "Can you shut the unit down?" "Yes." "Do it." The technician reached for the controls. The ventilation system switched off. The faint vibration disappeared. Nothing happened for several seconds. Then Hawke's shoulders dropped. His ears relaxed. His breathing slowed. Noah looked at Dr. Vale. "That was it. Part of it," Vale said. Tessa looked at him. "Part?" Vale nodded. "The vibration explains why he was unsettled." He glanced toward Tessa. "But it doesn't completely explain why he focused on you." Tessa looked at Hawke. The Malinois was no longer staring at her. He was staring at Sterling. And Sterling was still watching him. Dr. Vale lowered his voice. "Let's not rush this." Nobody disagreed. The medical staff gradually returned to the room. But this time they kept their distance. Noah remained beside Hawke. Marcus remained beside Sterling. Tessa stayed near the examination counter. The two dogs were quiet. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then Hawke stood. Noah tightened the leash slightly. Hawke didn't pull. He looked at Sterling. The older German shepherd stood. Hawke took one step. Toward him, Ling waited. Another step. Hawke stopped. Sterling slowly turned his head away. Hawke sniffed. His body relaxed another fraction. Tessa watched carefully. "He trusts him." Marcus nodded. "He's with Sterling during training exercises for months." "Still," Tessa shook her head. "I've never seen anything like this." Marcus smiled faintly. "Neither have I." Hawke finally reached Sterling. The younger dog lowered his head. He sniffed Sterling's shoulder. Sterling remained completely still. Hawke sniffed again, then gently touched his nose against Sterling's neck. Sterling turned his head. Their noses touched. For several seconds, they simply stood there. Noah's expression softened. "He's okay." Dr. Vale nodded, for now. Tessa looked at Hawke. "He's not trying to challenge him. No. He's looking for reassurance." Marcus nodded. "That's what I think too." Tessa glanced toward Sterling, and Sterling is giving it to him. Dr. Vale decided they could attempt the examination again. But this time, there would be no rushing, no unfamiliar noises, no unnecessary staff. And Sterling would remain in the room. Tessa prepared the equipment. She placed everything down slowly. Hawke watched. His eyes followed her hands. Noah kept the leash loose. Easy. Tessa approached. Hawke's ears lifted. She stopped. Sterling remained nearby. Hawke looked at him. Sterling didn't react. Tessa took another step. Hawke remained still. She crouched several feet away. "Hi, Hawke." The dog watched her. Her voice was quiet. "You don't have to be afraid." Hawke's nose moved. Tessa slowly extended her hand. Noah held his breath. Hawke leaned forward. He sniffed her fingers. Tessa didn't move. Another sniff. Then Hawke touched her hand with his nose. Tessa smiled. "Good boy." Noah exhaled. Dr. Vale smiled too. The moment was small, but everyone understood what it meant. The same dog who had nearly dragged his handler across the corridor now allowed Tessa to touch him. And Sterling had never moved. The examination took less than 10 minutes. Hawke's heart rate was elevated but falling. His temperature was normal. His joints were fine. His paws were fine. His ears showed no sign of infection. Nothing physically explained the behavior. Dr. Vale stepped back. "He's healthy." Noah nodded. Then it was the environment. Likely. Tessa looked toward the ceiling. The ventilation system was probably the first trigger. Dr. Vale nodded, and once he became frightened, every movement around him became another possible threat. Noah looked down at Hawke, so he wasn't trying to attack the nurse. Tessa shook her head. He was trying to create distance. Noah sighed. "That's a big difference." Tessa looked at him, very big. But there was another question. Why had Sterling reacted so differently? Marcus seemed to know what Tessa was thinking. "You're wondering why Sterling didn't react." She nodded. Marcus smiled. "He's been through worse." Tessa looked at him. "Worse than that?" Marcus glanced toward the older dog. "Search operations, aircraft, crowded shelters, emergency evacuations, training accidents." He paused. He learned something early. What? Not every unfamiliar thing is dangerous. Tessa looked at Sterling. And Hawke hasn't learned that yet. Not completely. Marcus crouched beside Sterling. The older dog leaned toward him. "That's why I keep him near younger dogs." Tessa smiled. "He teaches them." Marcus nodded, without making them feel weak. Hawke was lying on the floor now. Sterling lay beside him. The younger dog had his head resting near Sterling's front paws. Tessa watched from across the room. Noah sat beside Hawke. For the first time all morning, his shoulders were relaxed. "I've never seen him sleep in a new place." Tessa smiled. "He's not sleeping." Noah looked down. Hawke's eyes were closed. "He is now." Noah smiled. "You're right." The room became quiet. Sterling opened his eyes briefly. He looked at Hawke, then at Tessa, then closed them again. Tessa smiled. "He knows everyone's okay." Marcus nodded. "That's his job." The appointment was postponed until the next morning. Nobody wanted to overwhelm Hawke again. As Noah prepared to leave, Hawke stood beside him, then stopped. He looked toward Sterling. Sterling was standing beside Marcus. Hawke didn't move. Noah smiled. "You want him to come too?" Hawke's tail moved once. Marcus laughed. "Looks like you're not getting rid of us." They walked out together. Tessa stood near the entrance. Hawke passed her, then stopped. He turned. Tessa crouched. "Goodbye." Hawke walked back. He sniffed her hand again, then looked toward Sterling. Tessa gently touched the side of his neck. "See you tomorrow?" Hawke left, but Sterling remained for a moment. Tessa scratched beneath his chin. "Thank you." Marcus smiled. "He'll probably expect that every time now." Tessa laughed. Then I'll be ready. The following morning, Hawke returned. The ventilation system remained shut down. The corridor was quieter. The staff had been briefed. Nobody rushed him. Nobody surrounded him. And Sterling walked beside him. Hawke entered the treatment room. He looked toward the ceiling, then at the equipment, then at Tessa. His ears moved, but he didn't react. Tessa smiled. Good morning. Hawke walked forward. Sterling continued beside him. Tessa noticed something. Hawke wasn't simply following Sterling anymore. He was checking him. Every time something unfamiliar happened, Hawke looked toward the older dog. And Sterling always gave him the same answer. Calm, stillness, no danger. The examination went perfectly. Hawke allowed Dr. Vale to check him. He stood beside Tessa without pulling. When the doctor moved a cart, Hawke flinched. But instead of lunging, he looked at Sterling. Sterling remained still. Hawke relaxed. Noah smiled. That's new. Tessa nodded. He's learning. Afterward, Tessa sat on the floor. Sterling walked over. She opened her arms. The old German shepherd placed his head against her chest. Tessa closed her eyes. You really did save me. Marcus watched. He probably thinks you saved him too. Tessa smiled. How? By giving him a chance to calm down instead of treating him like a dangerous animal. Tessa looked toward Hawke. The Malinois was lying beside Noah. He deserved that. Marcus nodded. They all do. Tessa remained beside Sterling for several minutes. She ran her fingers gently through the fur around his ears. His muzzle was more gray than it had been a year earlier. She noticed small signs of age she hadn't paid attention to before. The slower movements, the longer rest periods, the stiffness when he stood. Tessa looked at Marcus. How long does he have left in service? Marcus was quiet. Not much. Her expression changed. He's retiring? Probably within the year. Tessa looked down at him. He's too young. Marcus smiled sadly. That's what everyone says. He scratched Sterling's shoulder. But his body knows. Tessa's eyes became wet. She hadn't expected that. Not after everything Sterling had just done. The dog who had protected her might soon be leaving. And suddenly, the moment felt different. Hawke walked over. He stopped beside Sterling, then looked at Tessa. She reached toward him. He accepted her hand. For the first time, both military K9s stood beside her calmly. One was learning how to control his fear. The other had spent years teaching everyone around him how to remain calm. Tessa looked at them. Maybe you two were supposed to meet. Noah smiled. I think they already decided that. The next several weeks changed the atmosphere of the veterinary wing. Hawke became calmer. Not perfect. Not fearless. But better. When something startled him, he looked for Sterling. When Sterling was calm, Hawke became calm. And when Sterling was tired, Hawke began staying close to him. It was subtle at first. Then everyone noticed. The younger dog had started protecting the older one. One afternoon, Sterling struggled slightly to stand. Hawke immediately moved beside him. He waited. Sterling stood. Hawke stayed next to him until he was steady. Tessa watched from across the room. She smiled. The lesson was already being passed on. Sterling had protected Hawke. Now Hawke was beginning to protect Sterling. And Tessa realized that this story wasn't really about one dog saving a nurse. It was about one veteran dog teaching another that strength didn't always mean reacting first. Sometimes strength meant waiting, watching, trusting, and knowing when someone beside you needed help. The next week, the hospital staff gathered for a small K9 handling briefing. Tessa stood at the front. Hawke and Sterling sat beside their handlers. Tessa looked around the room. The biggest mistake we made that first morning was assuming Hawke's behavior told us what he wanted. She paused. It didn't. Everyone listened. His behavior told us what he was feeling. Dr. Vale nodded. Tessa continued. He was overwhelmed. He was frightened. And the more people reacted to him, the more threatened he felt. She looked towards Sterling. Then one dog entered the situation without adding fear. Sterling lifted his head. Tessa smiled. And everything changed. A nurse asked, "How did Sterling know what to do?" Tessa looked at the old German shepherd. Maybe he didn't know. She smiled. Maybe he just knew what not to do. The room became silent. Don't panic. Don't rush. Don't punish fear. And sometimes... She looked at Hawke. Just stay. The staff applauded softly. Marcus looked proud. Noah looked at Hawke, and Hawke looked at Sterling. The two dogs sat side by side, the younger one alert, the older one calm. Neither knew they had become the most talked-about pair in the veterinary wing. But everyone else knew, and Tessa knew something else. Sterling's retirement was getting closer, which meant that one day, Hawke would have to walk into that hospital without him. And when that day came, everyone wondered whether the lessons Sterling had taught him would be strong enough to remain. 6 weeks later, the veterinary wing of Harbor Point Naval Medical Center looked different. Not physically. The same examination rooms were there. The same polished floors. The same stainless steel equipment. The same morning rush. But something had changed among the staff. People no longer spoke about Hawke as the dangerous dog who had nearly caused a hospital evacuation. They spoke about him as the dog who had been frightened. And they no longer spoke about Sterling simply as an aging military working dog. They called him what he had become. A teacher, a protector, a partner. That morning Tessa was reviewing patient records when she heard familiar footsteps approaching. She looked up. Hawke entered first. Sterling followed. Tessa smiled immediately. "Morning, boys." Hawke looked at her. His ears lifted. Then he looked toward Sterling. The older German shepherd continued walking calmly. Hawke followed. No pulling, no hesitation, no fear. Tessa smiled. "Look at you." Noah Briggs laughed. "He's come a long way." Tessa looked at Hawke. "He's not the same dog." Noah nodded. "Neither am I." She looked at him. "What changed for you?" Noah glanced toward Sterling. "I learned to stop asking, 'How do I control him?'" He smiled. "Now I ask, 'What is he trying to tell me?'" Tessa nodded. "That's the difference." The appointment went perfectly. Hawke allowed Dr. Adrian Vale to examine him. A medical cart rolled across the floor. He glanced toward it, then looked at Sterling. The older dog remained calm. Hawke relaxed. Tessa watched. She had seen that reaction dozens of times now. But today it felt different. Because she knew Sterling wouldn't always be there. His retirement was only days away. After the examination, Marcus Ellery walked Sterling outside. Tessa followed. The morning sun was bright over the naval base. Sterling walked slowly, not because he was frightened, because his body was simply getting older. Tessa crouched beside him. "You're slowing down." Sterling looked at her. She gently touched his graying muzzle. "You don't like hearing that, do you?" His tail moved once. Marcus smiled. "He hates it." Tessa laughed. "Of course he does." Marcus looked toward the hospital. "His retirement ceremony is Friday." Tessa's smile disappeared. "Already?" Marcus nodded. "Final evaluation is tomorrow." She looked at Sterling. "He's ready. His mind is." Marcus paused. "His body deserves the rest." Tessa nodded slowly. She understood. But understanding didn't make it easier. The next morning, Hawke arrived without Sterling. Noah walked through the entrance with him. Tessa immediately noticed. "Where's Sterling?" Noah shook his head. Final evaluation. Hawke stopped. He looked behind him, then back at Noah. Tessa saw his ears change. He knows. Noah nodded. He knows something is different. Hawke looked down the corridor. He waited, but Sterling didn't appear. Tessa crouched beside him. Hawke. The dog looked at her. She placed a hand against his shoulder. He's okay. Hawke sniffed the air. He looked toward the entrance again. Tessa felt something tighten in her chest. For weeks, Sterling had been his reference point. Now Hawke had to find out whether he could stand on his own. A technician moved a cart. The wheel made a metallic sound. Hawke's ears shot forward. His body stiffened. Noah immediately prepared himself. Tessa froze. For 1 second, the entire room seemed to return to that first morning. The fear, the barking, the panic. Then Hawke looked around. There was no Sterling. He looked toward Noah. Then, toward Tessa, he took a slow breath. And instead of lunging, he stepped backward. Tessa's eyes filled with tears. Noah whispered, "Good boy." The cart moved again. Hawke watched it. His body remained tense, but he didn't react. Tessa smiled. Sterling taught him. Noah nodded. He remembered. That was the moment Tessa finally understood. Sterling hadn't simply been calming Hawke. He had been teaching him how to calm himself. The older dog had never intended to become a permanent shield. He had been showing Hawke what to do when the shield wasn't there. And Hawke had learned. That afternoon, Sterling returned. His evaluation was complete. Marcus walked him into the hospital. Tessa saw them from across the corridor. She immediately smiled. Sterling saw her. His tail moved. Then Hawke saw him. The younger Malinois walked quickly across the room. Noah loosened the leash. Hawke stopped in front of Sterling. The two dogs stared at each other. Then Hawke gently touched his nose to Sterling's cheek. Sterling responded with the same quiet gesture. Tessa covered her mouth. She didn't want anyone to see her crying. Marcus noticed anyway. He missed him. Tessa smiled through tears. I think they both did. On Friday afternoon, the hospital held Sterling's retirement ceremony. It was small. There were no reporters, no cameras, just handlers, medical staff, several Navy personnel, and the people who had worked with him over the years. Sterling sat beside Marcus. His old working harness rested neatly on a table. Tessa stood near the front. Hawke sat beside Noah. Marcus stepped forward. He looked down at Sterling. This dog has spent years doing something that doesn't always get noticed. He paused, showing up. The room became quiet. He worked in difficult environments. He continued. He searched when people needed him. He stayed when others were afraid, and when another working dog became overwhelmed. Marcus looked toward Hawke. Sterling didn't fight him. He taught him. Tessa's eyes filled again. Marcus placed a retirement collar around Sterling's neck. The room applauded. Sterling barely reacted. He simply looked toward Tessa. She smiled. When the ceremony ended, Tessa crouched beside him. She wrapped her arms gently around his neck. Congratulations. Sterling leaned into her. You earned this. She looked at his old harness, then back at him. You don't have to protect everyone anymore. Sterling's eyes remained on her. Tessa smiled. Although I know you probably will. Marcus laughed softly. Absolutely. Hawke walked over. He stopped beside Sterling. Tessa looked at him. You've got a big responsibility now. Hawke looked at Sterling. Sterling looked back. Tessa smiled. Take care of him. Hawke lowered his head, then sat beside him. Noah looked at Marcus. I think he understands. Marcus smiled. I think he does. The following weeks were different. Sterling came to the hospital occasionally, but no longer for work. He came as a retired dog. He slept more. He walked slower. He spent afternoons beside Marcus. And whenever Tessa saw him, she always made time. Hawke continued working, but something had changed in him. He was calmer, more confident. And whenever another younger dog became nervous around unfamiliar equipment, Hawke would watch quietly. Sometimes he would simply stand nearby. Sometimes he would sit, just like Sterling had done. Tessa noticed. One afternoon, she watched Hawke settle beside a nervous trainee K9. The younger dog was trembling. Hawke didn't touch him. He didn't bark. He simply stayed. Tessa smiled. Noah stood beside her. He's doing it. She nodded. He's becoming Sterling. Noah smiled. Maybe that's the best thing he could become. Months later, Tessa was leaving the hospital at the end of a long shift. She heard paws behind her. She turned. Hawke was standing beside Noah. Tessa crouched. "Good night." Hawke approached. She placed her hand against his neck. He leaned into her. No fear, no hesitation, just trust. Then she heard another set of slower footsteps. Sterling, Marcus walked behind him. Tessa smiled. "There you are." Sterling approached. She crouched and hugged him. "Still checking on everyone?" Marcus smiled. "He refuses to retire from that." Tessa laughed. "Of course he does." The four of them stood together outside the hospital. The evening sunlight stretched across the pavement. Hawke stood beside Sterling. Tessa stood beside both dogs. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Tessa looked down at Sterling. "Do you know what you did?" Marcus smiled. "I don't think he cares." Tessa laughed softly. "He should." She looked at Hawke. "He changed this dog." Then she looked toward the hospital. "And he changed all of us." If this story touched you, subscribe and stay with us for more military K9 stories about loyalty, courage, second chances, and the incredible bonds between working dogs and the people who care for them. And if you've ever had a dog protect you, comfort you, or simply stay beside you when you needed them most, tell us about that moment in the comments. We'd genuinely love to hear your story. That night, Tessa received a message from Marcus. It contained a photograph. Sterling was lying peacefully on a blanket at home. Hawke was lying beside him. The younger dog had his head resting against Sterling's shoulder. Underneath the photograph, Marcus had written, "Looks like the student is still keeping an eye on his teacher." Tessa smiled. Then another message arrived. "And Sterling finally seems to approve of retirement." Tessa laughed. She saved the photograph. She knew she would keep it forever, because the image captured everything. The older dog who had stepped between fear and danger, the younger dog who had learned from him, and the nurse who had been standing in the middle of their story from the very beginning. Years later, Tessa would still remember that first morning. The barking, the panic, the terrified faces. Hawke's leash stretched tight in Noah's hands, and Sterling walking forward when everyone else was stepping back. He hadn't attacked. He hadn't challenged Hawke. He hadn't tried to dominate him. He had simply stood there, calm, confident, present. And somehow, that had been enough, because Hawke didn't need another person shouting commands at him. He needed an example. Someone who could show him that fear didn't have to control his actions. Sterling became that example. And eventually, Hawke became it for someone else. That was the part Tessa remembered most. The lesson didn't end when Sterling retired. It continued through Hawke. Then through every nervous dog, Hawke would eventually help. Because true protection isn't always about standing in front of someone. Sometimes it's about standing beside them long enough for them to find their courage. Tessa looked at the photograph one last time. The old German shepherd was asleep. The younger Malinois was awake, and his head was resting against Sterling's shoulder. The veteran was finally resting. His work was finished, but his greatest lesson was still moving forward. And somewhere inside Hawke's memory, every time fear returned, there would always be a quiet reminder of the dog who had once stood between him and a frightened nurse. A reminder that said, "Stay calm. You're safe. I've got you." And perhaps that was the greatest thing one military working dog could ever teach another. Not how to fight, not how to attack, but how to protect someone without becoming the thing they're afraid of.